Auckland. Of course, Auckland is incredibly important to the New Zealand economy, a lot of the hub of commerce for New Zealand, really, and it's also, of course, our gateway to the world for a very significant proportion of the people who come to and from New Zealand. So it's great to have an opportunity to have dialogue with the business community about the issues that are on top for them. I can report that it was a really positive and constructive conversation, that I found a very receptive audience in terms of business leaders who want to work with the government for the betterment of this country. There's a lot of optimism in the room about the fact that we have a great future ahead of us as a country. They laid down some issues that they would like to see the government working on. It will be no surprise to know that labour shortages, of course, were at the top of that list. But there are other things that we can go away and work on as well. They shared some reflections on the government's work program, on areas where they want to see us doing more and in areas where they want to see us doing less. And we'll take some time to digest that and reflect on that. And we'll continue with the conversation with the business community. Over the next few weeks, I hope to meet with a broader cross-section of New Zealanders as well, of course. I'm tending to meet with representatives of workers, so I'll be meeting with the unions, I'll be meeting with the ethnic communities, and I'll be getting out and around the rest of the country as well to make sure that I have the opportunity to get feedback from a broad range of Kiwis. But I did want to make sure here in Auckland that I got off on the right footing here in New Zealand's biggest city, and I'm really encouraged by the meeting that I have just had.
Prime Minister, are you considering changing the immigration settings?
We've kept them under review, and you'll see that we've made changes, a number of changes already to our immigration settings as part of that immigration rebalance. So I certainly wouldn't rule out further changes. The conversation that I had with the business community, though, was about making sure that we're getting the balance right between activating the New Zealand workforce, getting Kiwis into work, particularly thinking about that up to 10% of young New Zealanders at the moment who aren't engaged in education, training or employment. I think we've all got an interest in getting them into the workforce. So we had a conversation about that. So we've got to get the balance right here.
Does it matter about the relationship you have with that group in that room, and do you feel like you needed to reset that relationship?
I think the relationship between business and government is a really important one. It is, integral to the economy. We have shared interests here in making sure that we're creating good, well-paid jobs for New Zealanders, because that's how Kiwi families are going to be getting ahead. We all want to see the economy continue to grow. The rising tide will lift all boats. And that's actually the spirit in the business community as well. So I think we've got a real interest in working together.
With your conversation about needs, that 10% group that isn't in work, education or training.
Yes.
How can government and business work together to try and reduce that number? Were there any sort of concrete suggestions that were made?
Well, look, I've got some feedback on some of the things we're doing now. One of the things that business have really welcomed is the apprenticeship boost, for example, which has actually got record numbers of people into apprenticeships. Those are the sorts of examples of where government and business can work together. They're creating the employment opportunities and we're backing them to do that. And the result is we're going to end up with more skilled workers in the workforce over the longer term. So those are the sorts of areas where I think we can work together. I think we can bring our education system and our business community closer together. And that's something that I've been working on as Minister of Education. It's something I intend to continue to work on as Prime Minister. So those are just two small examples, but there's plenty more that we can be working on together.
The tech sector is a sector that's been going on for years now, about skill shortages they're facing. Apprenticeship programs. Does that match up with the shortages that they're seeing there? Are we seeing sort of increased investment in trying to get people into those sorts of high-paying industries?
Look, right the way across the workforce, you're seeing skill shortages and pressure in the labour market. And as a government, we're absolutely committed to addressing that at all levels. I used apprenticeships as an example. There are other areas, and the tech sector is a good example, where we can probably do more and we can probably work more closely together.
What is your message to some of these businesses that are struggling with the economic turmoil that's hit the country?
Look, we hear the concerns of the business community. We want businesses to thrive in New Zealand so that they can create good, well-paying jobs for New Zealanders so that Kiwi families can get ahead. And we will back New Zealand businesses to do that. They've given feedback on issues like wanting certainty in some key government policy areas, and I'll be working to make sure we can give them the certainty that they're looking for as quickly as possible. But I also want to, reiterate, though, that speedy decisions aren't always going to give them the certainty that they want, because deferring decisions, for example, which we could do quickly and easily, that's not necessarily going to create the sort of a certainty that business business wants to be able to thrive and to invest. So we want to make sure that we're making considered decisions that give them the certainty that they're looking for.
You acknowledge that Auckland bore the brunt of the COVID restrictions while you were the COVID minister. Do you think there now needs to be a specific focus on the economy of Auckland or the cultural scene of Auckland rather than a national focus?
I think we should absolutely acknowledge that Auckland experienced more days of lockdown than the rest of the country. Auckland was absolutely at the epicentre of our response to COVID-19, and there has been a long tail to that. I absolutely acknowledge that, and I'm absolutely committed to working with leaders in Auckland, whether they're business or community leaders, social sector leaders, cultural sector leaders, to make sure that we really get Auckland pumping.
Prime Minister, were you asked about slowing the growth in the minimum wage to take pressure off businesses and inflation?
That wasn't raised with me, no.
Is the government looking at slowing the growth to try to reduce?
We've got a decision coming up in a few weeks about the next minimum wage adjustment. I don't want to get ahead of that. Obviously, we'll get advice on that. We'll weigh up all of the factors and we'll make a decision and we'll communicate those. But I'm not going to get ahead of what will be a cabinet conversation, as there is every year, around the minimum wage.
But is this something that you could use to help businesses and help reduce pressure on inflation?
We've got to acknowledge that actually our lowest paid workers, minimum wage workers, are really feeling the acute pressure from the rising cost of living. So again, there is a balance here. With all of these things, there's a balance to make sure that we're supporting people whose budgets are squeezed, to make sure that their incomes are rising so that they can keep up with the rising cost of living.
Why did you choose to come here today, Prime Minister? Big business isn't exactly a warm, safe choice for your first outing.
Oh, look, I wanted to send a message that, the government is open for business. We want to work with the business community. Later on this afternoon, I'm meeting with a selection of small business community leaders. So, big businesses this morning, small businesses this afternoon. Because, we all have a shared interest in making sure that the New Zealand economy is really pumping and creating the sort of opportunities that we all want New Zealanders to have.
Are you worried that in the interim, before these changes come into effect, that smaller businesses, as you said, are going to hit the wall in the meantime?
Look, we know that the economic going is tough at the moment. I don't want to get into speculating about, exactly, the economic forecasters will give you a range of different scenarios for what we might see. But my main message is our government is going to be relentlessly focused on making sure that we support New Zealanders in all levels, in all walks of life, through what is a difficult economic time at the moment, so that we can come out the other side of that stronger as a country. Just a couple of questions over the back, and then I'll wrap up. So.
Did you give any of the business leaders in that room a heads up on what any of the projects your government might be reining in?
No.
And you've suggested that you're very much here to listen to business leaders. So when will the business community get to see that action take place?
Well, I think one of the things is when you listen to people, you need to actually listen to them and then you need to consider what they've said. And so I will do that. They've given me a lot of feedback. The conversation was really good. It was a two-way dialogue, and now I've got an opportunity to go away and feed that into the reprioritisation process that I have initiated.
How can you mentioned immigration a couple of times. How is your approach likely to be different to your immediate predecessor or other predecessors on the other side of the aisle?
Look, as I've said over the last sort of 48 hours, I'm only this is day 2, and I'm not going to get ahead of decisions that we might take. But we have always kept immigration on the table as an issue that we'll continue to reconsider as the pressure that we face as a country changes. We've had significant population growth in recent years, and that has created a set of pressures. We've had to catch up in terms of extra housing, in terms of extra infrastructure, and so on. And so that has been one of the factors that we've weighed up when we've made decisions around immigration. We also acknowledge that there's a significant skilled labour shortage, there's a significant labour shortage that we're dealing with across the country. New Zealand's not alone in that, though. Other countries around the world are also experiencing many of the same pressures that we are.
The latest statements from Treasury showed that in the 5 months ended November that inflation has actually been pretty good for the government's tax take around GST. Is that something you would think about amending or maybe reducing the GST that New Zealanders pay?
Look, I'm not going to write the government's budget on day 2 of my tenure in the job.
Would you?
Again, I'm not going to write the budget or tax policy on day 2 in the job.
Prime Minister, today is Australia Day. Do you have a message for Australians?
Australians are our great mates. They are one of our closest partners in the world. They're certainly our closest neighbour. I'm looking forward to getting over there, I think, I hope soon, to continue to strengthen the relationship between New Zealand and Australia. It doesn't mean we can't give each other a bit of a hard time from now and then.
Do you have a view on the future of Australia Day going forward? It's quite a controversial topic over there.
That's a matter for the Australians.
Transport
All right,
Minister-
one more. You can have the last question, then we're going to wrap up. Or maybe you can have one.
The Transport Minister has said that under your leadership, light rail in Auckland is going to remain a priority. What do you say to someone like Chris Luxon, who says that under their leadership they'd scrap it?
Look, the National Party's policy is a matter for the National Party.
How was it seeing Simon Bridges?
It was great, actually. Look, Simon and I have always had a good relationship, and it was nice to be able to catch up. I haven't seen him for a little while. He's looking much more relaxed these days.
Did he offer any pearls of wisdom as leader of a big political party?
Oh, yeah, he had a few observations, but I'll let him share those if he wants to. Thanks very much, everyone.